Welcome to Fast Politics, Peter.
Great to be back with you, Molly.
We are at the beginning, I think, of a supply chain crisis, not so dissimilar from COVID. So, talk us through what's happening right now.
Yes, what's happening right now is lots of companies that have depended upon supply chains that stretch across the Pacific Ocean have, quite understandably said, we don't feel like paying 145% extra for all the stuff we're bringing in from China. Maybe we'll just hold on with that. But it's not so obvious where else they can go because
Right.
a lot of companies have shifted production from China to places like Cambodia, Vietnam, India, other countries to try to avoid previous tariffs. And as we speak, we're in this 90-day pause on these extraordinary tariffs in some of those countries. But there's so much uncertainty about the rules that will apply that a lot of companies have said, let's just maybe stash our stuff in a warehouse somewhere on the other side of the Pacific and wait and hope that things get better. And as a result, we've got literally zero container ships at the port of Seattle, Tacoma, which is one of the biggest ports on the West Coast. We've got sharp traffic projected down at LA Long Beach. These are the
Right.
two ports in Southern California that are together. They're the gateway for 40% of all imported stuff reaching the United States by container vessels. And the head of the LA port, Gene Soroka, is now out there saying, we really don't know what's going to happen. We got the dock workers union saying they're really
Right.
worried. So you got all these factors that say less stuff coming in.
This is all about unintended consequences here. Like the tariff story is about this idea that there are intended consequences, right? Trump wants to onshore manufacturing. I'm not sure how imposing these steep tariffs can will countries to build factories to onshore
Right.
manufacturing. This was the kind of thing that needed to be done with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. But um, I want you to sort of explain to us why this uncertainty is going to cause problems for the supply chain. So people are not importing to you're not seeing port ships because they're not importing.
Right.
So just go downstream of that, right?
Okay.
So we're going
So
to have dock workers, we're going to have drivers, right? Dock workers are going to go on dock workers, drivers. Like, talk to me sort of what this looks like.
sure. So if there's less stuff crossing the Pacific headed for these giant ports, or on the East Coast, for that
Right.
matter, because stuff comes in from India and even in some cases from East Asia to East Coast ports, that is fewer containers to lift off of container ships and onto the shore by dock workers, who are some of the most highly paid and also militant workers in the American labor world. Then very unorganized truckers who are really at the mercy of swings in the global economy. Less stuff, less work for truck drivers. You're going to have a lot of people just sitting around waiting and hoping that cargo materializes. And on it goes. People working in warehouses and eventually retailers are likely to be hit because if there's less stuff coming in, there's less stuff to move and less stuff to sell.
But retailers are going to be hit with less stuff to sell, but ultimately consumers are going to bear the brunt. So explain to us how that goes.
I mean, if you're going off to Walmart or Target with the expectation that these operations are enormous, it's just like a magic trick. They never run out of anything. They've got 17 different choices for whatever product it is you're looking for. You could discover that things are back ordered. Shelves are empty. And the part of this that always bears discussing is there are lots of monopoly components
Right.
of these supply chains. If there's a lot of competition, then there's a chance that that somebody steps in to replace whatever it is that you're looking for, and that can keep prices lower. If you're a company that's got a dominant hold on your industry, then this could be fantastic for you. I mean, one of the things I've looked into in the
Give me an
past.
example of this.
I mean, beef. There's
Okay.
4 companies in the United States that control 85% of the beef supply. We saw
That's
this during the pandemic.
wild.
Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
that's beyond the robber baron days, right? I mean,
Right.
4 companies control 85% of the beef supply, and there's engineered scarcity there. There are all sorts of lawsuits alleging that these 4 companies essentially conspire. They stop their purchases when supplies are building up too high, precisely so you generate panic buying. I mean, the same thing that we saw, in terms of discussing avian flu, in terms of the egg supply.
Right.
Well, turns out there's only a
This
couple companies that dominate those industries.
this sounds a lot like OPEC to me, where the oil companies got together to inflate the price of gasoline. Is that a similar, I mean,
I mean, this is what we saw during the pandemic, right? So we saw
right.
product shortages that were caused by the chaos and disruption of the pandemic itself. It's not like there was some grand conspiracy by monopolists
No,
to make
no.
stuff disappear. But once
But
there's a
ultimately,
shortage,
it is a grand conspiracy by monopolies to keep prices inflated in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be,
I mean, the
right?
shipping industry, right? Like
Yeah.
every time there's a hit to the supply chain somewhere, we hear, "Oh, this is terrible for the global container industry. Oh my goodness, the Houthis are opening fire on from Yemen, on ships that are headed to the Red Sea. This is such a disaster for the shipping industry because now instead of going through the Red Sea to get from Asia to Europe, they got to go the long way around Africa. Guess what? Shipping prices go up 400%. And that's
Right.
everywhere, right?
Right.
Because
Right. Right. That's why not.
there's 3 alliances that control 90% of the traffic across the Pacific. So if a whole bunch of ships are suddenly deployed to go the long way around Africa instead of through the Red Sea, that's an opportunity to rip your face off in terms of
Right. Right.
pricing.
Right.
And yeah,
Right.
we're all paying for that in terms of higher costs. We saw this during the pandemic where we were told, oh, there's all this chaos, and that's why the price of moving a shipping container from China to the west coast of the United States goes up from something like $2,500 to north of $25,000. We're talking tenfold increase in the
Right.
space of 6 months. And people said, well, this is just, terrible for the shipping industry. Record profits. I mean, we're
Right. Right.
talking
Right.
like record profits.
So talk to me about diapers.
Diapers are a product that, despite their sheer simplicity, are actually constructed of lots of different pieces. Can't remember the exact number. It's like dozens of parts
Right.
drawn from around the world. You run out of one of them somewhere, you can't make a diaper. Think about the computer chip in cars during the pandemic, right? There's 30,000 parts in a car. If you run out of one component of a computer chip, you can make the rest of the car. As Ford at one point was making the F-150, its most popular pickup truck, and then parking them across the street from Henry Ford Elementary School in the shadow of Ford's corporate headquarters because they couldn't get enough chips.
Right.
Well, the diaper gets affected. We saw during the pandemic that we ran out of infant formula because there's one company that has a dominant hold on that
Right.
market in the United States. And if there's any disruption anywhere, we don't know where the problems will pop up, where they will, but they'll pop up somewhere.
It's a really good point. And, you can't just skip out on diapers, right? You're going to need diapers.
And you're
You're
gonna
not,
pay.
you're going
And
to
and
pay.
and
Yeah.
and that's a pricing power moment, right? Yeah, because if you got a kid in the house who needs diapers and the word gets out that there could be a shortage,
Right.
that's something you'll pay. I mean, think about the toilet paper shortage, right? I mean, those of
Right.
us
Paper
remember
towels.
during the
Yeah.
pandemic. I remember I was living in London, having to go down to schmooze the guy who talked to the truckers, who could tell me like what time does the toilet paper show up.
Right.
It could be like that with diapers. If you need them, you'll do whatever it takes to get them. And don't
Yeah.
think that companies don't know that in terms of
Right.
pricing.
So, like right now, there's this 90-day pause,
Yeah,
which means that nobody knows anything. There's no
right.
stability. Trump says 90 deals in 90 days. There's no, or that was Peter Navarro. We have yet to see a single deal made. We've heard like whispers of talks of whatever. It just seems like with the doc numbers, we are careening towards the same thing that happened during COVID, careening towards a scarcity event.
It's a similar dynamic, and one of the things that we learned during COVID is that fear of shortages creates shortages, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what happened with toilet paper. We didn't actually
Right.
run out of stuff to make toilet paper with, we got a surplus of people saying, "Oh my God, I better go buy some toilet paper."
Right, right,
And that could happen. And that can happen not just at the household level, but at the retail level, right? I mean, if
right,
again, your Amazon, your Target, your Walmart, you have enormous resources around the globe. You're able to charter your own container ships if you need to, and you want to get out in front of this as they're doing. We could wake up and discover that warehouses for a select handful of companies that are big enough have got all the stuff. Smaller players have got nothing. Meanwhile, households run out to buy as much stuff as they can because they're nervous, and that's how we end up in shortages. There's a whole other scenario, by the way, that nobody talks about because we're too consumed with what's actually happening. If Trump tomorrow said, "Oh, I'm really worried about this. Okay, I'm lifting all the tariffs. Let's just go back to how it was." Not predicting this, not saying that's how it is. That would be the COVID scenario. And we would get the shortages because what happened in COVID was, first factories in places like China and around the world were disrupted and we made less stuff. Then it turned out I say, the economists, businesses, they wildly miscalculated the impacts of the supply chain hit. So they assumed, okay, we're locked down, can't go to work, so we don't need stuff. This is going to be a basic economic downturn where the demand for everything goes down. Well, that was
right,
wildly wrong. So we're not going to the gym, but we're working out at home. We need Pelotons. Our kids aren't going to school. Well, we're cooking 27 meals for them at home. So now we need more kitchen supplies. Oh, they're
right.
stuck in the backyard, or we're buying trampolines. And all this stuff comes in from China. Once factories turn back on, the container shipping industry, which had actually set aside a lot of ships, they were idling in warm waters in places
Right,
like Greece. They said, "Oh my goodness, there's actually more demand for stuff than ever." And then we got what people may remember, these crazy floating traffic jams off the ports of LA and Long Beach, where you had 75 ships circling around for weeks at a time, waiting for a chance to dock because they all came at once. And that's what could
right,
happen here. Whenever this ends, we're going to get a surge of orders from wherever can produce them. And that could swamp the gears where we get the reverse. Like, instead of worrying about there's no ships in Seattle, there's no ships in LA, we could get all the ships coming at once. The dock workers can only handle so many. We can run
right.
out of truck drivers, which is what happened. In truth, we just downgraded truck driving to such a degree that anytime people have to go look for another job and then they get one, they don't like to go back to it. That's how we got the worst of the shortages, and that could very much be ahead of us.
Let's talk this through for a second because I remember during the COVID pandemic, we saw like lines of ships at different ports and, like hundreds of ships at ports. So you think that's sort of the scenario we're looking at?
I think for now, we're looking at the reverse of that, right? We're looking at few
Right.
ships
I mean,
coming in.
eventually, but if he
Yeah,
turns it
yeah.
back on.
I think whenever, I mean, okay, if we take as a given that this policy is designed to have us wean our dependence on long supply chains that span across oceans, then I guess we'll just start making everything in the US and everything will be fine. I mean, no one believes that this can happen
Right.
anytime soon. So at
Right.
some point, there's going to be some policy change that will prompt us to go back, maybe not China, maybe back to factories in Vietnam and Cambodia and other parts of Southeast Asia, maybe India. And whenever there's enough certainty that the big retailers say, okay, I get it now. I get where it's economical for me to source my stuff, there will be a surge of orders to replenish inventory. And that is likely to lead to traffic jams somewhere. Yes.
I wonder if we could talk about Carolyn Levitt for a minute, the White House press secretary. Today, Amazon decided, and it is actually kind of brilliant to publish exactly what these tariffs will cost, right? So you go on your Amazon page to buy a toothbrush. It says this toothbrush was $7. It'll now be $10, or whatever because of a $3 tariff or whatever. So, reporter, Amazon will soon display the product, a number next to the product, the price of each product, plus the amount that the Trump tariff is adding. Levitt responds, "This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Discuss."
The whole Trump fantasy here is somebody else is going to pay for this, not American consumers. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, right? Because Amazon is reminding the customer that if you increase the costs of the stuff that we buy from far away to serve you, we will pass on those costs to you.
Right.
However, we have no
Which
idea
is
what
true.
Amazon's margins are on any
Right.
particular product. We don't know how much competition there is. We don't know to what degree Amazon is availing itself of consumer anxiety and now stoking consumer anxiety to justify price increases. I mean, look, again, think back to eggs, a thing that we've all talked about today. We know that there's legitimate reason to think that the price of eggs should go up when there's avian flu, right? And we know that. And when there's inflation in general. How much? Well, we don't know because there's a couple of companies that dominate the egg business. And anytime, we go to the supermarket and think, boy, I better buy some more eggs. I notice the shelves are empty. All these people are jockeying around. Parts of the day, there are no eggs at all. That is pricing power. And Amazon certainly has pricing power as a dominant retailer. So the White House is not crazy to say there's a stunt connected to this.
Right.
Amazon is not crazy to say you stick 145% tariff on Chinese goods. That's going to hit a lot of stuff that you're used to buying from Amazon.
Right.
And we're not, I think it's fair to say that Jeff Bezos' enterprise is not charitable.
Right.
We're going to look to take it out of you, customer.
So it is a really good point, right? Which is that they don't need to raise their prices, but they want, they're going to raise their prices. So, and we don't really know what their markups are. So
Right.
we don't, so it's not like they're saying we buy this from China for 25 cents and we're paying a 75% tariff, right? We're not really seeing what the tariff is. We're seeing what the tariff number is on the final price.
I mean, this is premised on if you assume that our business is entirely about satisfying consumer interest for low prices and our margins are tiny and fair and we
Right.
don't engage in any
Right.
predatory behavior. So our prices
Hard
are
to
a
imagine.
perfect representation of Milton Friedman's, market
Right.
economy, then sure, you stick us with some tariff that gets passed on to the consumer, but we know that it's a lot messier than that.
Right. Really good point. But this Carolyn Levitt comment, I find it interesting. They really are offended by the idea that Amazon would transmit what they're doing. Right. I mean, ultimately that seems like the cardinal sin here is not marking up the goods to the American people.
I mean, it's counter programming, right?
Right.
Like in this reality show presidency, it's all about I'm working to bring jobs back to America, and
Right.
some days they say it's impossible to deal with inflation, but most of the time they
Right.
say, I mean, they certainly are aware that inflation seems to be how Trump came
She
back
got
to the White House.
yeah.
And they don't like the idea that one of the richest, most powerful people on earth, a guy, by the way, they thought they'd sort of muzzled with the
Right.
whole defenestration of the Washington Post's
Right.
op-ed operation, is now out there swinging, saying, "No, let me talk directly to your constituents, and I've
Yeah.
got something to say," and you're jacking up their prices. Clearly, that's not part of the programming that the White House would like to put out there.
Yeah, pretty incredible. I mean, and a really good point. We will see how this plays out. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Molly. Happy to chat anytime.
Yeah.